Miguel, is Troy Parrott using up all of his hat tricks too early? That's the burning question.
No, although funny, myself and John, a colleague of ours connected to Italian football, asked us why Evan Ferguson seems to be getting much more focused than Troy Parrott. Because I suppose that's simply because Troy is just banging them in. There's no concerns there. The only concern might be that he possibly goes up to a higher level. Um, but no, this is all good, positive momentum and a player in form.
Yeah. It's almost, it's still taking some getting used to have like a knacky goal scorer in our ranks. You know, like even he was saying, well, the second goal was more eye catching. There was more to it. He really enjoyed the being in the right place to, knock one in from close range. That kind of instinct, whatever it is, hard to coach. We don't really tend to have those very often.
No,
It's amazing.
we're not used to it in our history, are we? I mean, I was actually thinking about it even in relation to the type of goals that Parrott scored against both Portugal and Hungary. I mean, most of them, well, at least three of them were like pure technique, creativity. The sort of, I suppose, Dublin street football that people would have been talking about should be having more effect on our national game for years. But if you compare that even to our our best history, I mean, most of our tournament goals under Charlton were sort of like, I don't want to say spawny efforts. I mean, look, the playmaker in 1990 was Packy Bonner. Essentially assist or pre-assist for both goals, scrambled in. Sheedy's finish is brilliant. It's still a sort of different type of goal. The same with 1994. There's always been an element of us kind of like have it where not quite these psychodramas about scoring goals, but we've always had to fight for our goals, especially in big games. And then you've got someone like Parrott who is just such a release.
Yeah. No, I mean it's amazing. So I wonder, are you, because there's occasionally talk of Evan Ferguson going back to the Premier League. He obviously has more of a profile in the Premier League. Are you hearing much talk in Premier League circles, either of you, of Premier League clubs thinking Paris worth the punt?
There's about three or four that would like him. Actually, before people message in, I should, of course, mention Robbie Keane, who is the other great deviation from our fight for goals.
Yeah.
And like this is the other thing about Troy, that he is, Robbie's successor in that way. But there's about three or four clubs that would want Parrott. But from what I've heard, I think I said this in the show before, him and people around him, if they're going to the Premier League, they want it to be regular football at a top 10 or progressive side or upwardly mobile side. They don't want to be in a situation where they're suddenly potentially in the championship in a year and kind of have to think about that. And if they can't get that, they would love to go to Germany.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. I can see. I mean, there's a great kind of patience and logic at that, because it would be extremely tempting if there was a 3 or 4 year Premier League deal with the requisite money attached. You say, well, listen, you get injured tomorrow. Forget Germany. Take this 4 year deal now. You're made for life. It's 20 million quid. So it shows a certain kind of maturity there, a kind of Erling Haaland-esque long view, which is kind of rare enough.
Yeah, and I suppose that's coming into a lot of young players now. But of course, with Parrott, because I suppose he maybe did have to reassess his career a little bit in the first place, given he had been this great talent coming through at Tottenham. It didn't go in the way many expected, and he's had to take a less traditional route, at least for Irish players. At least it had been a less traditional route for Irish players. We are seeing a lot more go around Europe now, and it's so far really worked out for him.
Yeah. Don't mind us, John. We're just getting ready for the World Cup. That's all that's going on over here.
We actually had a planning meeting in the Independent this week, and I obviously we're trying to figure out who does what fixtures and all that sort of thing, how it works with the immense distance you have to travel. And I, of course, did mention, well, like there is the possibility we'll have to think about Ireland in these games, and as my colleague Richard Jolly said to me, and who have Ireland got in the last 16, Mig?
Era? Don't mind them, Miguel. So let's talk Michael Carrick, who is head coach. Interestingly, John, not interim head coach, just head coach. What do we read into that?
Well, I suppose everyone's an interim head coach, aren't they, at Manchester United these days? So you may as well get rid of that interim part of it. I was thinking the other day, actually, who was the first interim manager? And I think it was Rafa when he was at Chelsea. Perhaps Joe Kinnear when he went to Newcastle. Was that 2009-ish, something like that? But anyway,
caretakers, isn't they?
well, I think they gave him the job interim.
Yeah.
Which, there was a story. Anyway, yes, Michael Carrick. Manchester United are back in the holding pattern that we're all familiar with.
Yeah.
And one that, again, casting back, I remember it was a game against Hull where Ryan Giggs was in charge. And remember, Ryan Giggs is in charge, and behind him you've got Nicky Butt, you've got Paul Scholes, all sat there on the bench, all still in the 30s, and it was like, this is going to be the future of Manchester United, that, Fergie's boys will eventually take over, and this is what we'll see in the future. And we've seen that a few times over, but they're never handed the keys, are they? And that's the same with Michael Carrick, it would appear. And
I guess Solskjaer was handed the keys, I guess.
Well, yes, he was, and that now counts against any of the others, essentially. Now, there's a lot of Solskjaer revisionism against that. Now, the Solskjaer revisionism is that he was, his time was ruined by the Ronaldo purchase, that once Ronaldo came in, Solskjaer having to pay his dues to the United legend, both the legend of Manchester United and the legend himself, Cristiano Ronaldo, had no chance. And that in itself was a deal that came through from some back channel stuff through Sir Alex Ferguson. And there's this just great big split in the club, and you will hear it from people at the club, between those that want to push into the future, and that goes right back to someone like Ed Woodward or whatever, to those that want to roll back to Fergie's boys. And what happens is that the push for the future falls flat, as it did with Ruben Amorim, and then we end up with Fergie's boys. Now, Carrick is probably the most qualified of the Fergie's boys to do this job. He had a reasonable spell at Middlesbrough. He was on the United staff for quite a long time, was fairly well regarded, had actually done the caretaker job very briefly and did okay. But this holding pattern, I mean, I hear today that big Sir Jim Ratcliffe and a Glazer, I think it's Avram, have flown in to boost the new regime. Everyone must be delighted with that. That's really going to push things on. And yeah, we're doing it all over again until someone, somewhere, somehow finds a solution to Manchester United.
Yeah. No, a Glazers show support is just what this new enterprise needs. Miguel, John raises very pressing points there, really, that we've had Giggs do it, we've had Van Nistelrooy do it, we've had Solskjaer do it, and then Solskjaer did so well in that initial burst that he was given the keys, and that reached the ceiling as well. They've done it so often now, it has lost the sheen, there's no doubt. They're like, the excitement or the sense of Manchester United DNA has now been so road tested and frankly failed, that I don't even think the most ardent Manchester United fans feel that, we're channeling Ferguson through Carrick and it's going to ignite something that's very Manchester United-y. I don't think anyone's holding out that hope. And I agree with John as well. I think he's absolutely right to make the point that the Solskjaer experiment, and Solskjaer didn't do terribly as Manchester United manager.
No.
The Ronaldo thing did derail things, but Solskjaer doing very well as interim, getting everybody very excited that we've got the Manchester United juice, and then getting the job full time. I think that experience maybe will count against Carrick. It strikes me he will need to do extraordinarily well here over these 17 matches to be given the job, and maybe even the hierarchy don't want him to do too well in case they get railroaded into giving him the job again.
Yeah, I mean, look, unless someone is actually Ferguson in ability, outlook, capacity to kind of almost structure a club, which is arguably impossible now, you can't really outrun other more basic requirements for an elite football club. The structure has to be right. Now, to be fair, people in United would now plead and say and argue that they think they've got the structure around the head coach. It's like they'd say it's night and day to what it was 18 months ago. That is possibly true. Again, we'll see the test will only come with the medium to long term. And also within that, like this is a club that really has to figure out what it wants to look like. And part of the issue, of course, is that I mean it does feel like there's a club. There's no other club in the game that's obsessed with identity, especially with the way they go on about classic United virtues from youth to wing play. But yeah, these are all kind of vague notions rather than actual modern football identity in the way that matters, which is what you want a team to look like and what everything should be fitting into. There are actually parallels with the Tottenham Hotspur situation and Thomas Frank in that, like, Frank, although he's not shown it at Tottenham in any way, there is obviously a good coach there and a capable man who should be suited to the way that situation, given how kind of worldly and rounded he is. I do think he is able for that. But the problem is he's gone from a situation where Brentford had basically the absolute perfect structure for them, which will amplify the work of any good coach. And Keith Andrews is seeing that too, which isn't to diminish what Keith Andrews has done, to a situation of Tottenham where there's just this disconnect between what Frank is used to, what he does, and what the club has been for years. And like Tottenham are almost a mini-scale Manchester United in that sense. And United, it's why United will, until they eventually get this right, although we've been saying this for years now, they'll always have bigger issues than the identity of the head coach, especially a head coach who has a United connection.
And Miguel, just to follow up on something I saw in one of your recent videos for The Independent, you were making the point that Manchester United now have any number of sporting directors, football directors, executives. That whole suite has been filled out and certainly takes on the veneer of modern. You know, they've got Baruda from Man City. You're assuming he's best in class. Dan Ashworth left, crucially. We'll come to that. And so, you know, it's Ineos, it's marginal gains, it's process driven. And yet it's your feeling or your understanding or your information that actually for all of that beefed up executive suite, it turns out the billionaire who's in charge still has a fairly big and final say in what happens.
I mean, look what Amarim came down to. That was basically, I don't even have a time on this, but it must be more than an hour. Ultimately, the decision was made based on a lengthy one-on-one between Amarim and Ratcliffe, in which Ratcliffe really liked his personality and felt he had the personality to coach Man United. And it's funny, even when you speak to people at United in this, sometimes you get pushback on the ideas of kind of the owners getting involved in certain decisions. I mean, what would be said there was, well, he is the owner, he has a right to have a say. But of course, I mean, you have this almost self-defeating situation where he's trying to put in a modern structure, trying to empower it. And yet, because of the scale of Ratcliffe's influence, it's one of those situations where every decision that's made, even if it's subconscious, it isn't necessarily about what the best decision is. It's always about what Ratcliffe himself, you're always thinking up to what the ultimate, well, in this case, minority owner might want. Whereas he's the person in the room that knows the least about football. And it should just be a case of other people come up, the actual relevant people that know what they're talking about in this, you know, gather all relevant information, do all the relevant work, and present almost binary decisions to the owner, rather than him being immersed in so many different steps.
Is that your information, John? Is that what you're hearing on the ground about Ratcliffe's influence?
Yeah, I mean, Big Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the billionaire, the self-made billionaire from Failsworth, Manchester, via Beverley, which is East Yorkshire, and hadn't really lived in Manchester since he was 11, but he's a bank lad or whatever. When he went into the club, he said, you know, I'm here for a fun time. I've made my money in life. This is what I want to do. This is going to be fun. And so that's pretty much what he, and, you know, you look at his other sporting projects, you look at the America's Cup, where he got, you know, Team GB to the final with Sir Ben Ainsley from Macclesfield as the captain of the ship, and it all went wrong. And from what I understand of that falling apart, that was Jim's doing, that it came apart, when actually they were being quite successful. And there's other stuff that, you know, other sport, you know, the cycling team, I know you're a bit of a cycling guy, that has not gone as well as it did when it was Team Sky. And Jim's tentacles tend to reach as far into stuff as he can because he's the guy that made it really big in a chemicals company. And of course, why couldn't you possibly transfer those skills into football? Why not? And this is the thing. I mean, you have this issue at, I mean, you know, Miguel mentioned Tottenham there. Tottenham today have appointed a new, was it head of football or something like that, or director of football?
Head of football operations.
Yeah, then they've given, you know, Thomas Frank a new coach. And there's always just new people coming in to these clubs, isn't there? There's always people being injected. And, you know, Manchester United, they haven't got 5 sporting directors like Chelsea, but they're getting that way. They're getting that. And it's this group of people that surround Big Sir Jim, but actually just eventually have to do what he says because he's the guy that calls the shots. And if you fall out, like you mentioned, Dan Ashworth, if Dan Ashworth essentially says, I disagree with this major decision, and you brought me in to make major decisions, you don't last long. Now, speaking to people within the game that know Dan Ashworth, they say he's very much a processes guy. He's really good to work with, and he'll get you to where you want to be if you're prepared to give him the time. Jim did not give him the time, and that is how it's operated. And that one's a microcosm of how things are. And within Manchester United, the organisation, these cuts were made for very little financial gain in the end, really. The moral gain, well, it was a moral loss, wasn't it? A significant loss. Jim's PR was ruined by these, swinging cuts, which are then followed up by spending 200 million on forwards, 2 of whom have been fined. One has got a lot to prove. Meanwhile, there's people out of a job that they've been in for decades. And it's all to do with the billionaire ego, something that we all deal with on a daily basis through the jobs that we do, through the decisions that are made, through the way social media runs. And what we've had is billionaire class coming into football. And it's an old adage going back from the early 20th century that, you know, if you want to make a small fortune out of football, you go in with a big fortune. And it's exactly the same logic follows it. And, you know, the businessman does not necessarily mean a successful football man. And Jim is always trying to look for that person that can bridge the gap. And that person doesn't really exist in this modern era.
Yeah, well, he's not the first highly successful person in one area to think that imbues them with an intelligence in all areas. And even, you know, wasn't it striking when he was making those cuts you mentioned, John, and he did an interview with Gary Neville, and Neville said, look, the payments to former players, like we're talking players who served the club, and like we're talking about money for their funerals and this kind of thing. Would you not have just like got 3 players in from the club and done a testimonial dinner and just raised the funds to save that cut? And Ratcliffe kind of was like, never thought of that. And it, you know, in that moment, it's just kind of like it's damning. Miguel, your understanding of what happened with Ashworth, because when you think of the efforts and the finances to break him out of Newcastle, it's you know, it is still extraordinary that Ashworth left the club in no time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was told from one side that he made his opinions clear on what the club needed to do and the extent of Ashworth getting involved in everything. On the other side, people within United now, they would say that Ratcliffe got frustrated because Ashworth couldn't make a decision. Now, as John has alluded to there, one of the ways that Ashworth basically works is he canvasses opinion and then tries to see what works best for everyone. And like, to be fair, whatever people say about Ashworth, and like there were questions about whether he was exactly suited to that role. Maybe United needed someone stronger in recruitment. One of the things he is really good at is coming up with a technical structure for a club, how it should actually work, which a lot of people say is exactly what United would have needed. Now, their argument again is that they feel they finally got that right. But just touching on something there as well. I mean, like what I said in that video, and I wrote this for the Independent as well last week, and a big piece on Ratcliffe. You know, people talk about that it's this kind of billionaire syndrome where they think because they've been successful in one specific area and made a lot of money out of it, they can translate that to everything. And one of the examples that was given to me was when he belatedly tried to buy Chelsea towards the end of that process. Loads of people involved in it thought that, oh, well, here's Ratcliffe, he's going to blow everyone out of the water. this is it. Except then they found that first of all, he was only willing to match the Clear Lake or the eventual consortium that bought the club. He was only willing to match that offer. And secondly, and what was really crucial, whereas Clear Lake had quite a plan for the club, whatever you think of it and whatever you agree or disagree on the strategy, Ratcliffe didn't really. And like what people inside told me was basically that what they felt was their perception was that Ratcliffe kind of thought, I ran Ineos, this will be easy.
Yeah.
And it's hard not to think that's like, given what we've seen so far from Manchester United, that thinking initially applied, and he's only realizing now how difficult this is.
So how do you both think this is going to play out for Carrick over these 17 games, and where do you think Manchester United are looking for their next permanent appointment, John?
Those 17 games will go pretty quickly, I would have thought. I mean, we are talking the fewest amount of games for Manchester United season in over 100 years.
I think there's a 41-day spell. Admittedly, there'll be an international window in which we'll be marching towards the World Cup, John, but there is a 41-day spell where I think he's 3 games.
Right. And, for a club that has to generate a lot of newsprint and column inches,
yeah,
that would be a worry, wouldn't it, for Michael Carrick? There's that's a lot of athletic briefings and
it's a lot of Roy Keane calling out your wives. I mean,
well, exactly. I mean, what are the overlap going to do? I mean, they're finished, aren't they? They'd have to take a holiday or something if there's only that few. Yeah, we can laugh and joke. I mean, essentially, Carrick it's not a poison chalice because he'll be, he could do his reputation a good turn. Ruud van Nistelrooy did that this time last year, didn't he? And then took the Leicester job. His next decision needs to be better than that, you would have to suggest. Where they're looking next, do you know what? I really have no idea other than the sense that having gone for the young, up-and-coming coach, they'll now look for the big beast that is used to working and, maybe look towards the Carlo Ancelotti after the World Cup, or someone along those lines. That would appear to me, like politics, football clubs tend to go in one direction to the other, don't they? And that's pretty much the way. And that hasn't worked in the past. We saw Louis van Gaal arrive after the 2014 World Cup. We saw the Mourinho mistake. Even the Ralph Rangnick thing of trying to bring... I mean, actually, the Ralph Rangnick thing is one of the more bizarre things because he's brought in as a director of football, essentially, the sporting director, a philosopher to change the structure of a club. And then they end up just saying, actually, can you coach the team? I mean, that shows you the mess the club was in then. You may debate whether it's in a better position than now. And as Miguel says, those within the club will tell you that, yes, it is... things are going to get better, though we've heard that before. The big question, of course, now is Ruben Amorim was a coach that was wanted across football, was linked perhaps with the vacancy at Liverpool, perhaps with the one at Manchester City, should it have arisen. One of the hottest properties in the game. Are they able to attract that manager, that coach? Are they, because you actually look at the talent base that they're getting in the playing sense, Cunha and Waymo, Sesko, they're not top level, are they now? That you're dealing in a second tranche of talent. You're not getting the elite talent these days. And maybe that's the manager level that they're going to have to look towards.
Yeah, it's funny that, because actually we were chatting about it amongst ourselves one of the days, and I was kind of saying, well, look, Tuchel would be very tempting after the World Cup, or like Emery,
I'm sure.
Unai Emery, perfect. And there were many Aston Villa fans in touch to say Unai Emery wouldn't go to Manchester United.
Well, no, because what we know about is that he's essentially given the keys to Aston Villa, and that's the club that it fits best, and he's already done the big club thing. And that, he did Arsenal, he did PSG, he's at Aston Villa, he's absolutely idolised. And Emery's a smart guy, and he did the Villarreal experience, he did Sevilla, and those were the happier times of his career. But at this point in his career, aside from the finance, why would you go to Manchester United if you're Unai Emery? Tuchel, possibly, yeah, it's a reasonable call. Tuchel is a guy who I think he possesses a certain, I'm not going to call it arrogance, but a self-assurance to think, okay, I can do this. And he will also look at the way that he took the England job. It wasn't like, yeah, I'm going to be here to, help along the young players and, foster this culture. It was, I'm here to win. That's what you're paying me for. And maybe that's the manager that Manchester United need, not some great sort of culture change that someone comes in and just says, I'll try and win for you. How about that? That would make a difference, wouldn't it?
Tuchel was pretty close to the job in 2024. He, of all the candidates they interviewed in what is now described within the club as the beauty parade, where they clumsily ended up with Ten Hag again, who was interviewed for his own job. I think Tuchel got among the closest, and that quite appealed to them at the time. I think for all these reasons, he brings a charisma, and also it's a charisma with, I suppose, a lot of the modern trappings that they need. I mean, the Emery one's a bit like, given all what we're talking about, let's not forget with Emery, as well as it's gone with Villa, and he's obviously a good coach to a certain level, he's never won a major trophy. And a major trophy being in terms of what the biggest clubs actually want to win, which is the league title and the Champions League. He's only finished in the top two twice. One of them, both of those were in France. One where he lost the title to Monaco with unlimited funds, and the other where they won it after the Neymar Mbappe summer, and he was immediately sacked. And ultimately, the French league is so distorted by Qatari's PSG ownership that it doesn't really count. So it is like that's always felt a bit of a strange one for me to be suggested for United, because even from people I've spoken to at Arsenal, at PSG about how Emery handles a club like that, it's why I think Villa is the perfect club for him. And he wouldn't be a right fit for Manchester United for a few reasons.
Yeah. Speaking of clubs which require a certain charisma, Xabi Alonso is no more at Real Madrid, and Alvaro Arbeloa has found out early on just how tricky it can be. In the Copa del Rey, Madrid suffered a fairly embarrassing 3-2 defeat. And so, yeah, on Alonso, 34 games, it just seems as if the chemistry was wrong here from the very beginning. This is like a systems manager trying to go into Real Madrid of all places, where your systems are not welcome, frankly. And early on, we had Vinicius Jr. Protesting his substitution in El Clasico, very pointedly. I mean, this is a guy who's been covering his mouth when he talks since he was 3 years old, I reckon. And here he is, launching, why always me? I'm going to leave, as he's substituted and walks right by Alonso. Up to and including on Sunday, when Alonso is going to form a guard of honour as Barcelona will walk through to get their trophy on the pitch. And he has Mbappe on the side of the pitch kind of going, come here, come here, Xabi. And then Rodrigo joins in, yeah, come here, and Alonso has no choice but to skulk over. So, you can read a lot into those moments, but John, I don't suspect I am reading a lot into those moments. I think they perfectly capture the dynamic at this club.
Yeah, Real Madrid is a place where it's all played out in public, particularly by the players. I mean, at Real Madrid, which is something that's happened at Manchester United as well, to maybe a lesser extent, it's about the ego of the billionaire owner. It's about the ego of the players. And somewhere amidst that, a coach has got to fit in. Even if that coach is, let's say 2 years ago, it's less than that, in fact. Xabi Alonso is the hottest property in world football. What he did with Bayer Leverkusen was absolutely unbelievable. An unbeaten season. His only defeat, of course, coming in Dublin of that entire season. Just amazing. A guy that didn't almost reinvented the wheel, that combination of all the stuff he'd learned from the other managers and that German style of football, which is very voguish. And he created this team of a group of players that, when they've gone elsewhere, haven't really have shown actually just how good a manager he was. He arrives at Real Madrid. He arrives too earlier than he wants to, because Florentino Perez wants to win the first ever inaugural Club World Cup. Well, all right, it's not the inaugural one, but the first one that's the proper, bells and whistles. He wants to repeat what they did back in 1956 to win the first European Cup. So the pressure's on immediately. They get dubbed by PSG. And from that point on, that's when egos come out to play and the back channels begin. And we we joked before about all the long reads on Manchester United. Well, that's got nothing on what goes on in with Real Madrid, with Los Chiringuitos and all that stuff. Spanish radio is still a big deal, and then you have the internet as well. And he just folded underneath it. Does that lessen his quality as the coach that we saw 2 years ago? I don't think so. I think we saw the mastery of Carlo Ancelotti holding it together for so long, but he struggled in the end with that group of players. And then you see the way that after it comes out with so many players saying, "Well, it wasn't me that was digging out the manager." You've had the Jude Bellingham app, which we've all downloaded, I'm sure here. Which gave his opinion on the press reports. It's an amazing club. It's a soap opera. It's an impossible club to manage. When you think of Real Madrid, you don't really think of many coaches, do you? You maybe think in our time as, following the game, Vicente Del Bosque, you think of Carlo, maybe Zidane, and then the rest. There's been coach after coach after coach. Remember 20 years ago, Vonderly Luxemburgo and Carlos Queiroz, and not this sort of roll call of coaches that come in and out of the club. Meanwhile, they've got the biggest stars in the world. And Xabi Alonso will be, within 18 months, maybe the manager of Liverpool, but he'll still be a well-regarded coach.
Yeah, agree.
There's no shame in what happened to him. The shame lies with the players. But if you are a star at Real Madrid, shame goes out the window anyway. You are just... you're just a walking ego.
Yeah, no, I agree. Reputationally, I think he's completely untouched. It is a club which wants light touch regulation from their managers, and Xabi is Xabi is like central bank post the crash. Like it's tight grip, and it just was never going to work. Like Miguel, in your piece, one of the great quotes here. This is what I'm talking about. One dressing room insider put it blankly: "Nobody liked him." End sentence. End quote. And even like as ludicrous as this sounds, like the alchemy between Florentino Perez and Alonso was damaged somewhat because Florentino Perez wanted Alonso to big up the Club World Cup and talk about like how prestigious this would be to win it. And Alonso just couldn't bring himself to spout that kind of bullshit, so didn't do it to Perez's liking.
Well, and especially because he's in a situation there where he didn't want to take the job that early. He knew he didn't have the team to take it that early. His approach required work. And then suddenly he has to talk up a competition as if it's kind of the biggest of the new biggest ever. So yeah, there was an immediate disconnect. Perez very quickly, at the very least, was unwilling to offer public support. That was a lot of people noticed that. And then you're in this, even though Madrid say they want institutional change, he's just caught in the same bind as ever. He's between the president on one side and the stars on the other, which is why no coach can ever have that much of an impact. And it was that Valdano line that came out in the last few weeks that was on the front of one of the Spanish papers. Alonso will be sacked for doing what he was asked to do, which it does mostly feel true. I think, to be fair, even some people who would be critical of Madrid on the other side of that would say that there were potentially issues with with Alonso, how he dealt with the squad, how he dealt with some of the players. That I mean, nobody liked him is an exaggeration, but certainly there was there weren't that many. He was he felt a bit cold to people,
right?
And then you can see in a classic case when a manager can't impose his system. Well, what do? They go towards the young players because the young players are malleable. So I think before the last game, Arbeloa's first, which they lost to Albacete in the cup, I think Arda Güler, who is a great talent, but still very young, he was Alonso's most used player.
I'm seeing talk of Jurgen Klopp. Is that likely?
Madrid would love it, but given what he said recently, both about Madrid and just about his life, I don't think he really. I think at the moment he's got more interest in being on the board of Travago or something than managing Real Madrid.
He's in a lot of ads, that man. He really is.
I mean, that makes me think that he might, he likes his money and the money would be good. Listen, of course, I would share Miguel's doubts that it would happen, but Real Madrid is Real Madrid, and in Germany in particular, there's a link, isn't there? A lot of players have gone between the two clubs. Paul Breitner, Uli Stielko, going back for a long time.
Yeah.
Jupp Heynckes managed the club as well, of course, and was sacked for winning the Champions League, in classic Real Madrid style. But if you're a manager and you just think, I'm Jurgen Klopp, could I do a year of this? Well, he's enjoyed his time off.
He could feasibly parachute in now and win the Champions League. Or the league,
exactly.
They're not that far behind.
Yeah, 4 points behind.
Barcelona, as we've discussed, Miguel, Barcelona aren't that great. Our friend James Horncastle has this repeated theory that none of us realise just how much of a mess and how bad a team Barcelona are. And so, someone like Klopp could just come in and be a Real Madrid legend, but not have to do another 7 years at a club.
It's true. And even from an egotistical point of view, managing Liverpool and Madrid, there's just a certain sheen to that, which looks
yeah.
I have two quick ones. I'll put one to each of you rather than keep you here all day. Miguel, Antoine Semenyo, he's just that classic. How much did he cost again? 60 something, 50, 60 million?
62.5.
That's what I mean. It's that Manchester United sweet spot of they're not going to spend 200 million on a player.
Yeah.
Just sneak him in for 60. No one notices that. You know what I mean? And you were reporting that they're in the hunt now, very much so for Marquet. Are the 115 charges, I feel almost redundant asking this. Is this actually going to happen ever? Why is this taking so long? Or what are you hearing? Short answer if you could.
I've got a piece about this coming out over the next 24 hours.
Okay.
And I don't think there'll be a resolution this year.
For God's okay, we're moving on.
But it is amazing. You have this, no matter how it turns out, it is incredible because this doubt exists about the outcome. And they're a city, since 2018, when it was first opened by the Premier League, obviously reeling off trophies. Then you got the next stage where it went to the charges. And now we're supposed to have had the hearing, so we're waiting on the outcome of the hearing. So that, and even in that spell, they've won a treble. The hearing, since the hearing, they've spent a lot of money. It's since the charges they won a treble, but since the hearing, they spent £500 million. Arteta gets a lot of focus about the money that Arsenal spent in his time, but look at what he's up against in that regard. And that's net.
You realise when you said it won't happen this year, you realise it's January. You realise, this isn't something you're saying to me in October. It's January and it won't happen this year. Lemur Senior and Chelsea is a very kind of intriguing appointment. Arsenal beat them last night in the League Cup semi-final 3-2. And to be fair, from 2-0 down to 3-1 down, 3-2 is not so bad, albeit at Stamford Bridge, John. We had Damien Delaney on the show and he played with the Lemur Senior at Ipswich and said he was an excellent teammate. The kind of guy who has extreme emotional intelligence. If you sat down beside you in the dressing room and said, how are things? And you said, fine, he would say, no, really, how are things? And was very well, well regarded, well liked. And Damien felt this guy's going to land well with a young dressing room. The kind of public persona has already been fairly kind of, I think like online football smells blood in the water here with this guy. He's a LinkedIn post that has stumbled onto Twitter. Like there was a kind of video doing the rounds yesterday where he's talking about coaching versus managing, and he's he's saying things like, if you take manage and you split the word, it's man age, as into age man. And I did think, oh Liam, don't do this. This won't end well.
No.
So pronounce manage.
Your sense of Senior, who again, I'm sure intelligent, good guy or everything, but some of this shtick is going to really eat him up quickly unless results follow, I suspect.
Yeah, I was chatting to a colleague of his from Hull who couldn't speak higher of him, and he did a really good job at Hull as well. Of course, was briefly a colleague of mine at The Guardian as a columnist as well, and again, highly regarded. Listen, this is a nice person. And you know what? I think people are uncomfortable with this. That is a nice person. Earnesty in football, well, that's not happened for a while, has it? Anyone, and there are certain people who, that sort of LinkedIn, this business language and stuff like that, there's an edge of cynicism about it. But I don't actually think that's Liam Senior at all. He is this guy. I mean, his dad as well is a lovely man, and that's where we fear for him, don't we? Because because of the cynicism that we exist in, because of the social media that we I find myself drawn to, even though it drives a dagger into my soul almost every time I ever look at it. And that's the thing, is that he has to exist in that world, and he has to also exist at Chelsea, the most nest of vipers that exists in football, from the fans, which is a very divided fan group, not necessarily the match-going fans. They all hate the owners. That's pretty much it. And then you've got they're a very online support group, and he may well be someone that suits the structure of Blueco, but that doesn't necessarily mean he suits the culture of the Premier League in 2026, and that is the issue that he's going to have to stare down. And knives are out already for this guy, as they are out for just about any manager. We don't offer anyone any time. I mean, if you actually think of how long managerial tenures are lasting at the moment, it's grim for him, isn't it? And I don't really take any joy in that. If I take no joy in that at all, I think it's pretty unfortunate. He's clearly, as a manager of talent, he's done a good job at the clubs he's been at, but he's at Chelsea. Yeah. A club that just eats up managers. And you saw Maresca. I think with Maresca, I was at a few of his early games, and I thought Maresca himself thought, I can do this. I can manage my way through this. I've got the smarts to make my way and make something of myself in the game. And he did. He'll get a good job somewhere else. But you saw at the end, it just took him apart. And eventually he's just like, I can't do this anymore. This is nonsense.
Yeah.
And Liam Rosenior is someone that's going to have to walk that tightrope.
Miguel, is there room for an earnest, lovely man in the Premier League?
In our new sporting director culture, maybe there is. Maybe that's the... But it does feel a bit like everything has become Italy in that sense, in terms of what John was saying there about short tenures. Or if not, maybe not quite Spain, given how distinctive Madrid and Barcelona are, but certainly Italy, and the turnover of managers. But it's funny, actually, I was at the Chelsea game on Wednesday night against Arsenal.
Yeah.
And on the team sheets, they used to have their classic format of mostly, obviously, just the players involved. Now there's a big section including all of the staff with full names. So it does feel like that speaks to the future here.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Oh God, I know. I'm now worried for him. I'm rooting for him. Fellas, that was excellent. Thank you both very much, Miguel Delaney and John Brewin. Pleasure, gents. Good to talk to you. Cheers.